You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode is sponsored by Factor Meals. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 566, Collective.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau, sitting in for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we assimilate an episode of Star Trek, peek through its distinctiveness for any morals, meanings, or messages, and then ask ourselves collectively if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Collective, the one where 7 of 9 makes a startling discovery aboard a damaged Borg cube. If things were lonely in Cargo Bay 2 for her, well, they won't be for long when we welcome aboard a whole new crew of Borg kids. Norman Lau, I gotta say, I like the work that you do sitting in for Norman Lau. In fact, I think you might be the permanent guest Norman Lau.
Well, I'm the second Norman Lau. I'm filling in for the first because I have to usurp the first's authority in order to fulfill my destiny in the collective.
That's how it works, as we learn from today's episode.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I tell you what, while people are mulling over that, why don't you tell them where they can reach us and help us decipher who's first?
Of course, we'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcasts you love is to leave a 5-star rating and review at Apple or your favorite podcast platform. And always remember, your comments could be used on the show and we will add your distinctiveness to our own. And now here's John Champion with this week's assimilation.
I love it. You are fully in Borg mode. I love this. Like they're just coming right to you. I love it. All right. Today's episode, Collective, we have a story by Andrew Shepard Price and Mark Gaberman. And let's hear it again for this writing team, who we first met back in season 2 for a little episode they crafted called Tuvix. Oh, yeah, you might remember that one indeed. Since then, they contributed the stories for Warlord and Retrospect, and we will have just one more episode credited to them as we get toward the end of the next season. We have a teleplay by Michael Taylor. Pretty common to see Michael's name on an episode of Voyager by this point. We just covered his contribution in Blink of an Eye, and his time with the franchise, of course, goes way back to DS9, where he cut his teeth on a couple of classics there, like The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. This episode was directed by Allison Leedy, a first and only Trek credit for Allison, and all I can say is, where have you been for a franchise that has had so few women directors? Allison got her first pro-directing credits back in the 90s, and here's a great Trek tie-in for you. She directed a few episodes of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, with our favorite Jonathan Frakes. She has worked in a lot of television and even dabbled in genre series like Xena and The Twilight Zone, and more recently she has directed a number of the long-running Grey's Anatomy and several episodes of Scandal. And let's talk about our guest stars. Well, we meet a lot of new Borg this week, all of them younger than most who we have encountered up until now. There are the twins, Azan and Rebby, and we're going with their pre-assimilation names there, played by Kurt and Cody Wetherill, respectively. Now, both of these actors have just a handful of credits in other shows around the same time as Voyager, but they both continue to work in other aspects of production, everything from production assistant to location manager to cinematographer. Mizzotti is played by Marley S. McLean. After years of working as an actor, Marley attended law school and works as a consultant as of this recording. In the lead-up to Voyager, Marley had a small role in the feature Slums of Beverly Hills and made the rounds as a TV guest star with a short recurring role on Oh Baby. A few years after this episode, she appeared in Serenity, the big-screen sequel to Firefly. Not sticking around long enough to learn his pre-assimilation name is the First, played by Ryan Spahn. He has just one professional credit before this episode of Voyager, but Ryan has worked consistently ever since, whether it's as an actor or producer or writer, and many other stops in between. You may have caught him recently on shows like Big Love, American Horror Story, or Succession. And here's a fun credit. He was even a producer and consultant on the Logo series Cocktails and Classics, in which film discussion was helped along by drinking cocktails inspired by or made in the movies that the host watched. And here's a little bit of trivia about Ryan's character, the First. Look at the makeup. He is in the same kind of appliance as the unnamed species in the episode Blink of an Eye. So whatever happened there after Voyager left, at least one of them ran into the Borg. Finally, Icheb is played by Manu Intiraymi. In addition to making the rounds in TV guest roles, Manu has appeared in feature films like Pearl Harbor, J. Edgar, and Fifth Passenger. He has even appeared in the Trek-related fan spin-off projects Renegades and Unbelievable. Now, with the exception of Ryan Spahn, all of our Borg kids will stick around for more episodes of Voyager, creating a mini character arc for those characters right through to the end of the series.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. If you're looking for a real adventure in babysitting, the Borg has something for you.
Prologue. Chakotay, Tom, Harry, and Neelix pass the time on the Delta Flyer playing poker, with Neelix surprisingly skilled at the game. As Neelix calls Tom's bluff, they suddenly see a Borg cube appear out of nowhere, heading straight for them, prompting Tom to mutter, "And I had a full house." Act 1. The Delta Flyer flees the Borg cube, which relentlessly fires in pursuit. Neelix wonders why sensors didn't detect it, and Harry suspects that a dispersal field masked its approach. Tom tries evasive maneuvers, but with damaged plasma injectors, warp speed is unavailable. A direct hit weakens the Flyer's deflector shields as Harry works to repair the injectors. Neelix's photon torpedoes offer a slim chance of escape, but the cube captures them in a tractor beam, causing an explosion that knocks Harry unconscious. Sometime after, Neelix wakes from a nightmare to find himself, Chakotay, and Tom in a Borg assimilation chamber, and Harry is missing. They find a partially assimilated alien, and Tom fears that drones will come soon, but Chakotay urges for calm and a plan to escape. Meanwhile, Captain Janeway intensifies the search for the Delta Flyer and detects the Borg cube. As Voyager nears, the cube remains motionless. 7 of 9 senses its vulnerability just as it targets Voyager's warp core. Janeway orders return fire, but 7 is puzzled by the cube's erratic attacks. Tuvok destroys its weapons, and they sense something is wrong. Sensors reveal the away team is still unassimilated, but Voyager's weapons can't disable the cube's superior shielding. 7 discovers only 5 drones are aboard, not thousands. The Borg demand Voyager's navigational deflector in exchange for their hostages. Janeway requests proof of life and sends 7 to investigate. Upon beaming aboard, 7 realizes the Borg drones are not adults, but instead a handful of children. Act 2. 7 meets with the 5 Borg children, explaining she was once a drone and suggesting they return to their maturation chambers to evolve properly while she helps repair the cube. The second eldest, now the leader, objects, reminding her they hold the away team hostage. 7 complies with the original agreement and asks to see the hostages. The leader warns the others to assimilate her if she resists. On the way to the assimilation chamber, 7 learns the oldest, second, was replaced by the second oldest as leader after losing control. However, this hierarchy will be irrelevant once the collective retrieves them. 7 confirms the away team, minus Harry, is healthy in the assimilation chamber and warns Janeway not to underestimate the children who are in control. She scolds the second for failing to assimilate the alien body, and the young drone girl shocks Tom for trying to escape. Chakotay covertly signals Harry's absence to Seven, and after leaving the chamber, Second makes demands again for the Voyager's deflector array, but Seven replies she must report on the hostages and take an adult drone's corpse for investigation, and they agree. Janeway and Tuvok discuss Harry's disappearance while heading to sickbay. Tuvok is instructed to contact him using a Borg frequency. In sickbay, the doctor reveals that a pathogen killed the adult drones, and Seven concludes that the maturation chambers protected the children. The doctor confirms it would only kill Borg, and Seven confirms the children would kill the hostages if their demands aren't met. Janeway keeps the pathogen as an option, but won't use it until meeting the drones, and then leaves with Seven. Meanwhile, Harry regains consciousness on the Delta Flyer, sends a coded message to Tuvok, and peers into the Borg cube's vast hangar bay. Act 3. On the cube, Janeway and Seven negotiate with First, who demands Voyager's deflector. Again. Talk about a Borgian record. Janeway offers the children to return to Voyager and embrace their individuality, but First attacks Janeway mid-negotiation. Seven offers to repair the cube instead, and First gives her 2 hours. On Voyager, Janeway updates the crew, learning the pathogen will also be ready in 2 hours. Tuvok notes it's common for children of any species to act rebelliously. Harry, now infiltrating the cube, contacts Voyager, and Janeway sends him to destroy the shield generator with Tuvok's help. While working on the cube, Seven helps Second remember his pre-assimilation life, but First interrupts and orders him back to his station. Seven returns to Voyager and informs Janeway that the collective received the drone's distress call, but will not respond. The drones are severed from the collective, unaware of their abandonment. Janeway sees an opportunity to offer them a place on Voyager, but Seven is doubtful that they can overcome their separation from the hive mind. Janeway decides to wait before revealing this, determined to help the drones regain their individuality. Act 4. On the cube, Harry, guided by Tuvok's voice, navigates a maze of corridors using playing cards in case he needs to backtrack. Meanwhile, Seven faces First, who accuses her of stalling. She counters that his understanding of the data is flawed and invites the children to return to Voyager. An alarm sounds as a nearby maturation chamber fails, endangering a Borg infant. First refuses to help, but the others overrule him, and Seven transports the infant to Voyager. Harry reaches the shield generator and begins planting charges, but is interrupted by the Borg girl. She reveals a dampening field rendering his phaser useless, and by holding out the Queen of Hearts, that she, like Harry, is a friend of Seven of Nine. On Voyager, Janeway learns that Harry has broken contact while on her way to sickbay. Upon arrival, the doctor shows her the stabilized Borg infant. Though the child emotionally bonds with Janeway, the captain remains firm, ready to use the pathogen if necessary. Back on the cube, First confronts Seven with one of Harry's explosive charges, accusing her of deception. He reveals that Harry, now infested with Borg nanoprobes, is dying and needs proper medical attention. First demands the deflector array for Harry's life, and Seven is forced to call Janeway. Act 5. First demands Voyager's deflector. Again, but threatens to assimilate the away team when Janeway refuses. The cube's tractor beam locks onto the deflector, causing severe stress on the ship. Janeway orders shield adjustments, but the tractor beam adapts, putting the deflector at risk. Seven informs First that the collective received the children's distress call, but chose to ignore them as inferior drones. First threatens to prove their worth by assimilating more species. Meanwhile, Voyager detects a flaw in the cube's shields, and Janeway orders a feedback pulse from the deflector to disrupt both the beam and shields. The pulse overloads the cube's shields, allowing Tuvok to beam back Chakotay, Tom, and Neelix. Harry and Seven remain out of range, so Janeway amplifies the pulse. Seven urges the drones to drop their shields, but First refuses. When he attacks her, Second intervenes, and the rest of the children watch in confusion. First attempts to prevent the cube's destruction, but is electrocuted and collapses, clinging to the hope that the collective will come. Seven tries to comfort First in his final moments, and the girl drone reassures him that his collective will find a new home. Later, Janeway reports the away team is safe, and the children are free of most of their implants. She assigns Seven to care for the children. Seven, unsure but accepting, introduces the children in Cargo Bay 2 to their respective names and histories before they step into their regeneration chambers, while Seven watches them finally go to sleep, no longer as drones, but as children. The end.
All right, well done on the recap, my friend. And starting out with a poker game, it's a bit of fun, and it's fun to have Neelix being bad at it, but of course he's on a winning streak. And I assume this is correct. I did see a bit of trivia that this is the first time we have seen Star Trek characters playing poker since 1994, when in All Good Things we ended on a poker game.
I didn't look closely enough, and I should have, and I'm sure that someone's going to email us about this, but were those the same props at the end?
Oh, that would have been fun.
Yeah.
If they did that. Yeah, little replicated cards and chips.
Yeah, because the chips had I think it was like a copper-ish kind of sheen to it,
like
right?
the copper and kind of silver, copper and pewter kind of look. Yeah. Don't make them too shiny. They pick up the lights.
Exactly. And it's neat to see people passing the time playing poker, but it is a human game. So how does Neelix, I mean, how did he gain the expertise of not just playing poker, but learning the nuances of bluffing and reading the player? I don't know, unless he, like Talaxian and Hustlers, just played the person and not the game.
Oh, there we go.
You know?
That's it. Yeah. Now, whenever we have this in the premise, I always have to ask, where is Voyager? And why are there ever away missions that are so far away that they aren't in immediate contact with Voyager no matter what? You know, it just seems like if you're all alone and there's only 140 something of you and he only has so many shuttles, just don't stray too far away.
Did they, I don't know, maybe lump scene this and scene that with Memorial, because it's the same four?
Oh, yeah.
So like, hold on a second.
Yeah, interesting that we get those together. Yeah.
So I don't know if they'll get PTSD from, I don't know, a bad poker hand. Or perhaps they'll get it from not having a proximity alert go off when a giant Borg cube just enters your space because we're playing poker.
You would think. You have to get him to speed up that plot, though.
I mean, I get it. Yeah. It's like, okay, so I remember it goes into the commercial. I'm like, you're kidding me, right? A Borg ship's just going to appear out of nowhere and no alarms. And then there's the whole, the saving throw. Oh, a dispersal field to mask their approach, because of course there is.
That's how it works. Right? Yeah. Got to pay attention. Is this the first time we have ever seen a Jeffries tube inside a shuttle, and specifically inside the Delta Flyer here? Because, I mean, the Delta Flyer has got everything. They have this room of infinite stuff in the back where they keep their EV suits, they keep all the science lab equipment, and you got a Jeffries tube, which I would think if you're on a shuttle, you don't want any sort of little walls to hide anything. You want to be able to get to your stuff right away. But kind of cool, I guess, to set up the pretense of the episode of Harry being kind of lost and separated from the rest of the group.
I mean, from what I understand, it's bigger on the inside.
Yes, so I've heard, yeah. I like this moment on the bridge when the Borg collective agrees that they will have one individual beam over, and Janeway just kind of looks behind her and like, yeah, of course Seven's going to beam over. Who else would it
It's like
be?
You're supposed to have that collective record scratch moment where everyone on the bridge are like,
yeah.
Her?
Yeah. Her. Yeah.
Whatever happened to futile?
Yes, exactly.
Instead of futile.
We all say data and not data.
Right, data, capital D, data,
Thank
small
you.
d. That's that whole, when Locutus looks at that Riker at the end of Best of Both Worlds 1, is like, resistance is futile.
Yep.
And I think that would carry it across, like, maybe several instances of the Borg, like later on in TNG. But all of a sudden, when Data does the exact same line in First Contact before he takes out the Borg Queen's, equipment, she's like, resistance is futile. I'm like, no, it doesn't sell that way. It just doesn't sell that way. I'm sorry.
The Borg, as a collective mind, they should have understood that and say, ooh, this sounds much better. From now on, all billion of us, we're all going to say it this way.
The marketing's better that way. Mm-hmm. Timestamp 8 minutes, 8 seconds. I did this because I thought Kate's body positioning in this scene was very good. She stands up, or Janeway stands up and approaches the center of the bridge, and she kind of like hulks over herself. So there's like this apex predator kind of like movement to her body when she's addressing just the drones in their voice form. She's leaning forward and she's like, come on, bring it. Really.
She's got to toughen up, and I love it. Yeah. Borg baby. It's just a creepy image, and I love it, and I will have more to say about that later. But yes, what a way to introduce that idea. Seven says to the Borg kids, you should still be in maturation chambers. What? Because two of these kids are practically adults by my estimation. We don't know how long they've been in maturation chambers. We don't know how long since they were assimilated. I mean, they're kind of grown up,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm the world's worst reader, but I do my research when I hear a word that just I don't understand. So I'm talking about the word neonatal because Seven called these children neonatal drones.
Yeah.
So the Merriam-Webster online definition of neonatal states of relating to or affecting the newborn and especially the human infant during the first month after birth. So are we to assume that these children were born?
Right. I think it just has to be that they had only been assimilated within a very short time frame and had been thrown into a maturation chamber, maybe just to finish off the assimilation, but we haven't really seen that as necessary before. So in that case, if they hadn't been assimilated that long ago, it should be pretty easy to get all that Borg stuff off of them.
Is the baby Borg a neonatal Borg, or during the simulation process when their individuality is driven out of them and then they turn Borg, are they neonatal?
Right. Are they neonatal? Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. The other thing that I'm not sure about is that we talk about the technique to assimilation and how maybe they haven't done so well perfecting their technique as we look at one botched corpse after another. I thought you just let the nanoprobes do the work. I thought you just stuck the tubules into somebody's neck. They do the work. So you have to wonder how bad things got for these Borg kids.
Right.
They're like, the nanoprobes don't work. We're going to do something else, which is completely wrong.
So I love this scene early on when Seven says it's about Second's voice problems. The first said, we've matured long enough. And then Seven says, doubtful. Your thoracic nodes haven't formed yet. You're incomplete. It's basically Seven saying, you're not even out of puberty yet because your voice is still cracking.
Right.
Peter Brady, eat your heart out.
It's time to change.
It's time to rearrange.
I love this scene in sickbay when Tuvok says neutralize. Janeway says murder, and has thought, wow, man, Tuvok, he has got a way with changing the words to try to change the outcome. It's very interesting stuff, which we'll get back to.
There's a really interesting shot here. Say Tuvok is kind of like arguing for the need of the pathogen on one side of Janeway, and then there's the doctor arguing against murdering children on the other side of Janeway. And Janeway's like right in the middle. She's like, I see both your points. Now, I get that's a little bit dramatic, but it is very ethos, pathos, logos going on right here.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Really nice shot as we close out the act with the Delta Flyer caught in the cube. Like, I feel like we see a lot of the same Borg stuff over and over because we do. They have to reuse those sets, but then they'll dress them up differently, or we'll get a cool matte shot like this where it's just something new and fresh, and I thought that was very cool. Now, I mentioned where he is from. So he's from the same planet as Blink of an Eye. We learned about the Norcadians in Sunkatse. So a little name check to them. But we don't know the Brunali yet. I guess we'll learn more as we go along because we got Brunali kids on board and we'll see what they're all about.
Is Sunkatse now our new Schisms?
Oh, it might be.
Or Genesis?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly. Or you have to get soon cut. Yeah.
So Janeway says to the children, like, maybe it's hard for you to accept, but you don't have to rejoin the hive. The doctor can remove your implants. You can come with us. You were individuals yourselves not long ago, children with families. You were abducted and assimilated. So again, how does neonatal apply to that?
Yeah.
I'm really stuck on that. I'm sorry, folks. I'm not.
Look, I don't blame you. It is a weird word choice.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Not sorry.
All right. This whole exchange here is great. On the bridge, B'Elanna wants to know why the Borg, or why they on the bridge are negotiating with Borg kids. And Janeway says they're unpredictable, and Tuvok is like, yeah, teenagers. He's wonderful.
I got a few myself, he says.
I know, yeah. That whole dynamic is great. And you mentioned the voice stuff before. I thought that was a really nice detail with Icheb's voice modulator not working quite right, and then Seven fixing it. It was a good little moment for them, a good detail. Now, I am surprised that the Borg would just leave a cube out there at all without the self-destruct and maybe ensuring that the Borg would deactivate themselves. It just seems like a lot of their tech floating around in the galaxy that somebody else could use or gain tactical advantage from.
I'm glad you bring that up because it's something that I really want to get into in discussion.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, bookmark that.
I love the camera direction, the slow camera push into Seven when Seven's talking to Janeway about her experience of assimilation as Hannah Hansen and her parents' death. And it's really slow. It's very deliberate. And Jerry just eats up that scene.
Yeah. So good. So good. I like this scene between Harry and Tuvok over the comm while Harry is walking around trying to find his way through the cube to the shield generator. Harry just takes a beating in this episode in so many ways, and he's playing it well. I seriously doubt that Harry would remember the order in which he dropped those playing cards. That just, no, I'm not buying that. I love also the relationship between First and Seven, because First, basically, when he accuses Seven of stalling, he's essentially saying, like, you're not doing the job that I told you. And Seven comes by, like, maybe you're not doing such a good job yourself. So, great.
It's not my fault. It's your fault.
Yeah. Great banter. And again, we get a really good look here at the baby prop or baby. We have both going on. We have a baby prop, and we also have a baby with some very light implant prosthetics on. Creepy, weird, realistic, just strange. Yep.
Now I can't get the whole Martin Short thing in my head. It's like, me? He goes,
it's not me. It's you. It's him, right? You can tell it's him, right? Yeah.
There is something disturbing about like the test tube baby Borg in distress. But I do remember somebody pulling a drawer open on a Borg cube and seeing a baby kind of like flooded with fluid, or seeing some type of dynamic going on there, some type of pumping dynamic. It was a bit much.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I like how we established that Harry is already freaked out by haunted houses, and then the end of his journey of trying to find this place and set the charge is you confront him with a creepy child who stole all of his cards, just to make it that much scarier. Like, we are driving this home that we are torturing Harry.
It's a nice little callback to Fear.
Yeah.
The whole dream
really
sequence with Fear.
Great shot back in sickbay. So the Borg baby has been beamed over, and you've got Janeway, I believe, holding the baby, and then the doctor just sliding it. And by the way, here's the pathogen. Mm-hmm. I mean, perfect pairing there. Yeah.
I wish we spent a little bit more time with Seven holding the Borg child, because now she's seeing both worlds. Pardon the pun. But the human pre-assimilation version, and then obviously the post-assimilation tubule baby. I just felt that they needed to spend more time letting that cook a little bit.
Agreed. Tubule Baby, also a good band name.
Right.
Now, I love, again, Harry just taking it left and right in this episode. That shot of him slumped over in mid-assimilation with this stuff not working. Wow, great prosthetic, great look, great as in creepy, but yeah, well done.
So what's going on with Harry here? You saw Janeway and Tuvok like walk in the hallway, when they headed towards the doctor and sickbay. Janeway asked Tuvok, how long has it been since you lost contact? And then Tuvok said 4 or 5 minutes. I'm like, wait a second. This answer bugs the heck out of me, right?
I'm glad you noticed that too. Yes, that was so weird.
He's Vulcan.
Yeah.
So wouldn't his response be like 4.47 seconds?
Yes, exactly.
A half Vulcan called Spock would have done that. I'm just saying.
You're right.
Then there's an interchange with Tuvok and Janeway, like on the bridge, and like, well, are we going to use the pathogen? We have the ability to be able to get past their shields and like activate it. Tuvok says to Janeway, there is no alternative. Janeway says, there's always an alternative. We just need to find it. For me, that is one of the best lines ever in Voyager. Period.
I love it. Hard agree. That is some Kirk speak right there, and I am here for it. I love the way that is shot. I love the way it's delivered. I love the way it sends home the message. And then what happens? We jump immediately back into the Borg cube for this moment that Seven is trying to convince the kids that there is an alternative, that they can save themselves and actually have a future on Voyager. Great pairing of scenes. So good.
I also like the blinking chest armor between Icheb and, or I would say Icheb the second and first, because it was interesting. Yep. Like the armor wasn't overtly intricate, but there was some, some interesting kind of like mechanics going on there. I do love Seven's kind of her tenderness when the first is dying. It wasn't overplayed, but I did really like the girl, like Mitsati is her name.
Yeah.
I liked it when she knelt over him and said that, we'll be okay. It's almost like she's kind of the surrogate Annika.
Yeah.
If she was still alive, or if Annika was that age, if this happened on her cube.
Yeah, agreed. Now they're all back home. They're all on Voyager. Seven is getting to know these kids and letting these kids get to know something about themselves. And I love this. So we have Icheb, we have Mizari. They have their pads, and they get to have a moment where they get to acknowledge their names and talk and have a moment. Azan and Rebbe, yeah, you don't get to talk. Yeah, we're not paying you for that yet.
I know. Wonder Twin powers deactivate.
Right.
I do love the final scene with kind of like Seven looking at all the children in their alcoves, and they're about ready to get tucked in, quote unquote. But there's something really special about this kind of like Ripley-Newt relationship between Seven and Mizati.
Did the Borg kids ever ask each other who's on first, what's on second, who's on third, and so forth?
We'll get right back to Collective after a word from this week's sponsor, Factor Meals. Norman, if there's one thing a starship captain never has time for, it's meal prep. I mean, just like a Janeway, right? How do you burn a replicated pot roast?
That's a really good question. And if you don't have a certain sponsor at hand, that very well may happen to you. I mean, sometimes we have barely enough time to eat between recording sessions. And that's why Factor is such a total game changer when it comes to meal prep. I mean, these are chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that show up at your door fresh and fully prepared. No replicators required, no risk of burning, just heat and eat in 2 minutes.
So look, whether you're looking to eat healthier, or lose a few pounds, or just make sure you're actually eating real food instead of grabbing whatever is closest, Factor has got you covered. Their keto meal plan has been clinically tested and could help you lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Of course, your results might vary depending on your workout plan or fighting a Gorn, whatever it is that you do in your spare time.
And you don't have to stick just to one meal plan. Factor has 40 options every week across different dietary preferences. You have Calorie Smart, you have Protein Plus, you have Keto, if you like keto, and more. So you'll always have variety. And I mean, if you're like me, the kind of person who just likes coffee and forgets breakfast, they've also got really amazing smoothies, and you have these grab-and-go snacks. You have all types of munchies to get you going through the day.
All right, you mentioned the magic word. You said smoothies. I love the smoothies. When they show up and you have a little variety, there was a pineapple, turmeric, like citrus thing that was so good. Their greens smoothie, I love that. I like to keep, a couple of them here in the fridge at the office, and they're just go-to kind of midday pick-me-up. Those are great. And I got to tell you about a couple of recent meals that I had from Factor. I had a pasta with bolognese sauce that was wonderful, and chicken thighs with garlic, mushrooms, and mashed potatoes. oh man, so good. Yeah.
That sounds so good. And these are meals that are, again, they're really, really fresh. They're 2 minutes in the microwave to cook and have in front of you, and you don't have to worry about, I don't know, opening up an emergency PB&J container that has
Right.
bread and peanut butter and jelly.
Right. You don't need that. No, these are good. They're satisfying. They're quick. They're easy. And I feel good for eating them. So if you're ready to fuel up for your next adventure, whether that's conquering your to-do list or boldly going where no meal prep has gone before, Factor makes it easy.
Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping.
That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
And hey, just think of all the extra time you'll have for the holodeck. Priorities, am I right?
So, Norman, did you have the immediate thought that I did, which is, Star Trek Voyager meets Lord of the Flies? Because I kept looking somewhere to see, wait, is that what the writers had in mind? And I didn't find anything specific about that. But that is what I thought. And look, it's a paradigm that could apply to all kinds of iterations here, but that's the one that I thought of. Did you have any other parallel that you thought of when you saw this story?
I mean, it's definitely there for sure, whether it's like loosely based on, or maybe we just didn't get the reference like quickly enough, but that dynamic is there. I mean, who would be Piggy?
Yeah. Well, then, good question.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there is kind of like that age old architecture of, and I'll get into this point a little bit after yours, but it's kind of like a what you leave behind dynamic.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. I want to hear how you go down that path. I was thinking, the thing to me that was interesting about the position that these kids are in is that we have some questions that are unanswered. We know that they are incomplete Borg, but we don't know how long they've been Borg. Obviously, 7 of 9, she was assimilated somewhere around 6 or 8 years old, and the bulk of her all of her adolescence and then part of her adulthood, she is Borg. She is a fully formed Borg. And there is no question about that. We don't really know where these kids fall along those lines. We don't know, maybe 1 or 2 of them only assimilated not that long ago, maybe some of them for a long while, but maybe the assimilation didn't take or it's incomplete, they have some growing up to do, etc. There was something that it's really not an important point, but it was interesting to me that at the very beginning of Voyager's encounter with this cube, so the Borg kids are responding with the usual threats, right? And on Voyager, you just hear that classic Borg voice. You will be assimilated, resistance is futile. Or futile, right?
Oh, futile. You were right the first time.
They hear all this, and it's the voice that you already know. But none of their systems are actually working. So I kept trying to get into the heads of these kids, knowing, well, what exactly is happening here? Are they just repeating what they've heard? Because anytime there is a foreign object in front of them, that's what they do. That's what they know to do. Or is there some sort of built-in broadcast system in a cube that is just, it gets triggered by a foreign object, it just transmits that message even if nothing is working. So it felt to me like there was a little bit of disconnect between, and it's designed that way dramatically, obviously, but there is a disconnect between who these kids are, what their abilities are, and then the front that they're putting up toward Voyager or whoever else is going to find them before Voyager did. And it just made me sort of question a little bit, like, okay, how many times have they had to do this so far? And what do they do any time that they're faced with a foe that is stronger than them or potentially weaker than them? Do they just keep going down this path of botched assimilations? There's a lot we don't know. There were disturbing answers no matter how you slice it.
Well, I mean, there was that botched. I think that was like proves the point. You didn't really have to like go further than that to know that they're immature in so many different respects. I have a couple of answers for you, but I do have one example of what did I think of? Was it Lord of the Flies-esque? Yeah. And then I have on my notes here, I have Miri Miri on the Wall.
Wow.
Or the Charlie X Factor.
Oh, man. You're on fire, my friend. You are on fuego,
sir.
Yep.
Yeah. Janeway says they're not exactly drones. Mature Borg are predictable. They'll ignore you or assimilate you, but these are juveniles. They're unstable. And Tuvok says they're contemptuous of authority.
Yeah.
Convinced they are superior, a typical adolescent behavior for any species.
Meet my kids.
But
yeah. Right.
You're feeling kind of like that uber rebellious age, where you have a handful of leadership kind of like influencing like these younger children who are looking up to their leadership because that's the only leadership they have to look up to. Now, when the Borg cube approached and they said, the whole "we were the Borg, resistance is futile." If you really listened, I don't know if it struck you as much as it struck me, but if you really listened, it sounded like that declaration was not as full. It was a little tinny and somewhat adolescent sounding.
Okay. I think they
and I'm wondering if it was on purpose.
Yeah,
Exactly. Because their vocal modulators weren't working.
Yeah.
Peter Brady.
Right. Yeah. Well, but they did that interesting thing, though, where 7 beams over, you hear them speak as the collective in the collective voice first, and then you sort of fade out of that, and then it's just the first voice as himself. Almost like that moment where you say the word Armageddon in The Hunt for Red October, and then you go from Russian to English. and then just here's your point where we're going to proceed in English to make this easier to understand.
And she'll give us one chance in 3.
Right. But there's something that isn't fully formed there. And it is interesting to see the little tip-offs as they're assessing this on the bridge, because they immediately, as they should, go into this defensive posture. But something's not right, and they're all looking at each other to figure out what isn't right.
Well, that's where I want to kind of like, I'm glad that you asked that because, or pointed that out, because it leads into this whole, this notion of what you leave behind. What are these children? What do they represent?
Yeah.
Because they don't have any adult drones leading them. They don't really have any connection to the collective, so that their collective, the tether that brings them together as a collective community is gone. Yeah. It's just the 5 of them, or 6 of them, because there was another one, the little baby Borg.
Right. Yeah.
A few hundred years ago, I'm going to take you on a journey here, John, and the audience. A few hundred years ago, a famous Starfleet captain, during a peace negotiation, once quoted a powerful and poignant African proverb: "When the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled." Meaning, when powerful forces go to war, like the Borg and Species 8472 in the Delta Quadrant, it's their people who are hurt or killed, and their children who are left behind. These are innocents, right? Who never asked for the conflict in the first place. Yeah. Right? They're just either caught up in it or killed or left to survive, like these Borg children have been left to survive without parents or guardians or leaders. So the Borg in Species 8472, they've annihilated so much of their own species that perhaps all that is left right now in the Delta Quadrant are these children on both sides. I mean, I went as far back to the 4th season to the episode Prey. And that's the episode where we see Janeway and the crew caught in the middle of this Herodian hunt because there is a straggling 8472 species member who could have been an adolescent.
Right. We don't really know.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, they were left behind. It was left behind, or maybe several were left behind when this, the species 8472 retreated to fluidic space and the Borg went elsewhere. So now you have these 2 superpowers. They're gone, but their children are suffering the aftermath.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm just wondering if that's what we're seeing here. That's why the collective wants nothing to do with them, because they don't want anything to do with him, period. Let alone being immature, or on their own. That's the way that I see it. It's like, it's a war. They're the survivors of war, but they didn't want it to begin with. They had no say in it. I
love that idea because we haven't really explored the ramifications of, yes, we know what happened when 8472 came back, but we haven't really explored how much that may have hobbled the Borg, or at least a certain part of the collective. And Star Trek Voyager not always doing such a good job of connecting the long arcs of its own storytelling. That's a really nice way to retcon that. Maybe it was intentional, maybe it wasn't, but I love what you just did there by connecting those, because why not? This could easily have been a cube that felt the blunt end of that experience. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the pathogen, talk about the ethics of manufacturing that. Because I feel like I'm a little bit torn here. I feel like we didn't spend a lot of time in that. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, or maybe we spent just enough time talking about that. I kind of go back and forth when I watch it. The first time I watched it, it really just blew by me. And I was like, wait a minute, here's this potential bioweapon that is extremely serious. We really just get a couple of scenes of discussing it. Then upon rewatches, I was like, okay, well, maybe this is a little more prominent part of the story than I'm giving them credit for. But it's so interesting. Tuvok is ready. He is just absolutely ready. And as you pointed out, the Doctor, he sees this as straight-up murder, if not genocide, if this thing goes further away. Complicated by the fact that these are children. These are kids. And then you got Janeway right in the middle, considering every option. But then you introduce Seven here, who just very bluntly answers yes, that she thinks that those drone kids will kill the hostages. So where are we? Do we have... Is it more or less ethical to have this weapon in the back pocket than, say, Harry Kim's phaser? Now, the little kid says, the little girl, Mizati, says it won't work in here. But you could also beam over several other crew members who have several larger phasers, and they could do the same, if not worse, damage to all of those kids. I am certainly not advocating for the use of a bioweapon. I'm certainly not advocating for the genocide, potential genocide, if this were to spread to other Borg of a whole species. But what do you make of Tuvok's enthusiasm here? And Seven kind of backing him up, at least in the respect that she's telling Janeway that her options may be limited.
That's a really good question. And if it weren't for Virtuoso, I would have seen Janeway's attitude towards the Doctor completely different when it came to listening to him versus feeling like she's still just being dismissive towards him.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because that's where I think the line that I said in Observations, about if there's an alternative, we have to find it, is more important than probably anything that we've seen in this episode or up until this point for a long time in Voyager. Because without that, it's one of two things. It's either Janeway is going to use the pathogen and justify the murder of these children because they're Borg, or she's going to threaten to blow up the ship again.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Which has been kind of like these operating choices. It's very ironic that she's technically the one or she has the potential of introducing a biogenetic weapon to kill the Borg in the same way she did to 8472 in fluidic space. Right. So here's this, the godlike power of what the Doctor literally hands to her while she's holding a baby could not be more poignant, could not be more bonk on the head.
Yeah.
But my issue here, it wasn't so much like Tuvok's enthusiasm, because aside from, Spock being hopped up on flower
spores, he's ready to go.
Flower spores. Is there, or Cybok, is there an enthusiastic Vulcan out there? But maybe, I think what Tuvok's issue, I think basically what it is, all kidding aside, Tuvok is Janeway's way out without bootstrapping the Doctor again.
Yeah. And, maybe Tuvok's point here is, well, it's not unethical until you use it. And I can kind of understand that point. Like the technology is just the technology until you put it to use. But they are, look, the Doctor, under orders, identified and replicated that pathogen. So they fully know what this is for. And by the way, that knowledge still exists. Even if they destroy the sample that they've got, that still exists. They could find themselves facing down several thousand Borg cubes next week, a month, next year, and just say, oh, remember that thing that we had? We could replicate that thing, and we could knock out 1 million, 100 million, 1 billion Borg just so we get home. Is that more ethical if they're being shot at, if they take out that many, as opposed to just having this in your back pocket to threaten these kids?
I mean, you can complicate the matter by introducing another cube or another sphere or another ship with, again, children. Only children remaining on board, because the majority of the Borg adult drones have been wiped out in war, like on planets or fighting 8472 in fluidic space, et cetera, because there's a reason why that post-World War II, there was the ratio of something between 12 to 15 women to 1 Russian man.
Wow.
Because of World War I, the revolutions of 1912, February and October, and then World War II. An entire 2 or 3 entire generations of men wiped off the face of the earth because of that period of war. Right? And what's left? Women and children. Right? Yeah. So that's kind of like what we're dealing with here. We're just dealing with the aftermath. Like, there are only going to be children or young drones because all of the adult male drones or female drones have been eliminated in war. So, and that's, what do you do with them? Who's responsible for these children?
Well, because I'm a little surprised. Look, we needed to end up where we ended up. That's a sweet, lovely scene at the end. I'm a little surprised that Seven would be less on board with helping these kids right at the beginning, especially because if these kids are less mature than Seven was as a Borg, then, like I said before, it seems like it would be easier to transition them back to human, to just start taking out some of these implants, And Janeway, of course, totally right. If there's anyone who can reach them, it's you. Yes, that is a foregone conclusion. But Seven had a tough journey at first. She is fully on board now with the idea that it is better to live as the person, the entity, the individual that I was before being assimilated. So I would think that right from the beginning, she would be saying to Janeway, oh, wait a minute, these are kids. They have not fully matured as Borg. I need to do this, just like you did this for me. Yeah.
I think it would have been really interesting at the end, because I really do love the way that this episode wraps up, where when Seven's collecting all of the data pads that the children's read about, their original identities and where they came from, if they left one behind, and it was Annika Hansen, like she just bet, okay, this is someone who was very much just like you, and this person was given, this young girl was given a choice, and I thought that would have been a really good capstone to, like, okay, you don't have to belabor the point. The emotional anchor is there. Let's get on to the next episode.
Harry leaving a trail of cards in the Borg cube was too simple. Ricky J would have been able to take over the entire ship with a deck of cards.
All right, we have navigated the corridors of the Borg cube. We have left our cards behind, only to have them picked up and thrown back in our faces so that we can wind up here, escaping by the skin of our teeth, to summarize collective and ask each other if the episode holds up, and in the mission log tradition, if we learned anything, if there are morals, meanings, or messages to take away from said story. So, Norman Lau, collective, does it hold up?
Not really.
Okay. I want to hear about this. I want to hear why.
it's neither here nor there for me.
Okay.
Right? I felt that, I think I mentioned this in observations, and there were a couple other things that I probably could have brought up, but I think something in this episode, certainly in the script level, needed to be pushed more emotionally, a little harder. I think both in 7 and bringing up kind of like maybe just more cathartic events about Annika Hansen and how she tries to use that to connect with Second or Icheb, or especially Mazzotti, because it was around the same age when she was assimilated. I just feel that for the majority of this episode, most of the emotional content or context stays a little too on the surface for me. They tease really, really good ideas, like the scene between Icheb and Seven, where he strokes her hair and said, "My mother had hair like this." And then it just kind of like vaporware. It just doesn't go anywhere, but it could have.
Yeah.
You know, she could have used that moment emotionally to help drive the wedge between the leader first and second, and give Icheb back his agency as the leader of this collective. But it didn't go there. It didn't risk enough of that emotionally for me. Again, Seven could have played up and connected more with how did Annika Hansen endure assimilation, and then once she learned about that, transform herself from that Borg back to Seven with Annika Hansen's soul, if you will, intact as a learning opportunity for these children. So I thought that could have been really interesting. There should have been kind of like, I understand you because I was you moment. And again, we never really got that emotional push just to go further because it's there. I saw it there. I think that this episode could have, again, delved into more of Annika Hansen's history. I think that there was a really good kind of like either mother, daughter, big sister, little sister relationship between Seven and Mazzotti. That could have been pushed a little further. But I think it just got a little too caught up in the underwear of technobabble again. You know, where everything's like, look, deflector dish and, you know, tractor beam and modulate this. And of course the Borg are going to modulate that, this, that, and the other thing.
Knock out the shield generators.
Right. Are we going to pathogen or not? You know, and I don't think it needed to get to that point. I think that we could have used, again, a lot of Seven's influence there as a person who has been on both sides of the equation at that same age range as these children, and say, you know what? This is how it could be for us. This is certainly how it can be for you. I got the chance, and now it's your chance. So that's where maybe, you know, they could have won over the first and not have to, you know, maneuver him into what he did and then get himself killed. Get all of the children off that boat, right? But again, it falls a little bit more formulaic for me in that sense. That's why it's not really an episode that holds up for me. Right. But how about you? That's just me. How about you? You know?
No, but here's what's interesting. I really get that. I really get what you're saying. And looking at it in retrospect, you know, there's something that every writer for a dramatic scene should be aware of. It's something that actors do, like when they're improvising a scene together, and that's that you always heighten the drama. It's like you have to find the heart of that scene and go for that. The scene is not about the, you know, 10 minutes or half an hour or 6 days of prologue that got you to that moment. The scene is about the moment where the drama is at its highest. And what you're pointing out here is really, it does sort of lay bare what is missing. And I hate to say it, but you could almost go back through the script and you could remove some of the scenes with Harry walking through the corridors, or with Chakotay and Tom being stuck, or a lot of this other stuff. You could take those out and give back those minutes to Seven really finding the emotional heart of these scenes with these Borg kids, because they all have, look, you could consolidate and, you know, a scene with Icheb kind of speak to what would also be an emotional bond with one of the other kids. But regardless, you need those scenes to go a little bit deeper. They're very good, but they're not mind-blowing. That is a great point. Now, all that said, I do think this episode holds up. And I think part of the unfairness of looking at this episode, the way that we're looking at it, is we're looking at a single slice out of what is now designed to have these other characters around for a little while. So we're watching the setup here, and we kind of have to buy the setup. So that is a little bit unfair in what we do here on this episode today, which is look at this singular unit, this one episode, right? But I got to say, right away, huge props to director Alison Leedy. And I said it in the trivia, but I am so bummed that we didn't get more of her on track either before or after this episode. Her shots are tight and efficient and just solid throughout. You know, you mentioned these scenes of like Janeway's body language on the bridge getting up to confront the Borg. Like these are actor decisions, but they are also director decisions about how the actors are directed and what stays. Like what is the final shot choice? Right?
The interesting thing is, like, I forgot to mention this in observations, but there were a couple directing choices where I was like, wow, you're really entering kind of like Sam Raimi territory here.
Yeah,
with some of these very extreme canted angles, and I'm here for that.
Yeah. So maybe one direction choice that I disagree with is, you know, when our away team are first finding themselves in the Borg cube stock and Tom has his outburst, you know, you got 3 more potential drones. Yeah, like, come on. You know. But aside from that, the episode is just technically really well done. Another aspect that I like is I like it when maybe Voyager bites off more than it can chew. You got multiple ideas working here. Now, to your point, it is kind of a tech, we got to solve the problem episode, where they could have spent more time on the emotional heightened drama of the episode. But look what we've got. We got elements of horror. We do have some thoughtful character moments. There is dramatic tension. There is an ethical question. There are ideas about identity and responsibility. And way to turn the tables on Seven of Nine, who has been essentially, up until now, the child under Janeway's guidance, and now make her the mother/teacher figure, right? And even the weird little gimmicks, like the Borg baby, they could have easily not worked, but here they committed to it. They didn't overplay it, I don't think. The reactions of our main actors were authentic. I mean, you know, again, leave it to Voyager to just go in a weird direction, somehow make it work. Not all the time, but I feel like definitely this time. And finally, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but they have created a character like Naomi Wildman to show that a young person on Star Trek can actually work and can have some reason to be there. And I already know that there's more to come with these Borg kids. So I like it when Voyager finally gets around to having a good idea and letting it evolve into a longer arc. So I hope I am just as happy with that longer arc as I am with the setup here.
Do you mind if I sidebar for a second before we get into morals?
I would love that.
Meanings and messages, because when I'm listening to, I understand and I completely appreciate like where you are with, you know, your decision with recommending this, or does this hold up? But the thing is, like, the one thing that we haven't really discussed or maybe even agreed on is, what is the threat here from the Borg? You know, what do the children possess? 5 of them, that an entire fully staffed and highly educated and experienced command staff on Voyager are unable to diffuse with these 5 children.
Yeah.
Like,
well, they're going to rip out the deflector grid, the deflector room.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but there are ways. You know, there's a pathogen that's far more deadly in its potential of what it can do to these children. So, I think my biggest issue with this episode is my journey with the Borg throughout all of Voyager so far. I wrote down this particular sidebar because I want to be clear about this meaning. I don't want to be trashing the Borg, and I certainly don't want to be trashing the Borg as an idea in Voyager, but I just want to kind of create this like a flow chart of where I am right now with the Borg, because I know that there's probably going to be more Borg that happen because we have the children now and you know, the potential of that story. Yeah. So the Borg were once at the power levels of gods. Right? Yeah. Entire spacefaring races needed to align themselves just to survive annihilation against the Borg. Whatever's left behind, they assimilated. But over time, like any all-powerful anything in Star Trek, after a while, gods simply become alien power explained. And so now is the Borg.
Yeah.
So the issue with the Borg here is like, okay, once you see the, through the veil of their supposed unbeatable power, prove like everything else in Star Trek that they are not gods and they are just aliens or alien-esque or adjacent, you can codify them, you can break them down, you can defeat them, and they lose all of that allure, that power, that legacy. And we love mentioning Arthur C. Clarke's third law here, right? So the Borg at one point in time to so many species were magic until they could be scientifically explained away.
Yeah.
So at one point in time, this highly advanced power, they're just not even like that anymore in the Delta Quadrant at this stage in the game. So here's the big question at this stage of Star Trek and Voyager. If the Borg are just another explained away alien superpower, then will they just eventually become another ubiquitous Star Trek alien of the weak race? Right? Voyager, forgive me, folks, I'm going to say this. I'm just going to rip this Band-Aid off. Voyager, for all intents and purposes, have diluted the Borg. For me, maybe perhaps ruined their legacy for all time. They are the Darth Vader in a Hello Kitty motif. For me now, right? And I'm sure people are throwing things at, don't blame John, just blame me. Send me all the emails. Now, sure, it's awesome that you have that kind of love and agency over your fandom. But what does that do to the fandom when said legacy has been reduced to kind of like this lowest common denominator that is total accessibility to what they stand for? The Borg are no longer the Borg, the immovable object and the unstoppable force at the same time. Right? That's what made him terrifying. When those drones carved up the Enterprise D saucer section just because, and no one could stop them except for Q, that was terrifying. That's what made terrifying, or that's what made Vader terrifying. You couldn't stop him until you humanize him and then explain away the power, and ultimately it's just science again.
Oh, you're not going midichlorians, are you?
I just said science.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go any further than that. But and the thing is that it's not just the Borg. It kind of it's like the law of diminishing returns is in full effect right now at the stage of Voyager with the Borg. So I'm wondering what's left.
Okay.
I
think that's fair criticism, and it's criticism of the choice to keep bringing them back. Like, how much more can you get water from that well? I get that. I don't disagree with you. I'm very interested to hear how this furthers the conversation among our listeners who want to chime in about this. Of course, we are talking about a specific period in Star Trek and a lot more Star Trek to come after this. But I also wonder if there is some Star Trekian utility in the idea of demystifying the unknown threat, demystifying the mystery that is out there a bit. I think that works also, but I also think if you're trying to tell the most dramatic story and you're trying to have the most dangerous foe, as soon as you make them not as dangerous, then, well, you're telling a different story. So that said, my friend, let's see if we landed on any morals, meanings, messages. This is going to be great fodder for further conversation. I do think that this, as I mentioned, it's a little bit of a tech the tech. We got to solve the problem. We got to get out. Are we going to use the pathogen or not? So the stakes are pretty narrowed down. There's not really a bonk bonk on the head message here. Go do this. Save the whales. Don't eat paint. But again, very interesting ideas here. We have to resist. The collective will come for us. That is what the first says. When constantly confronted with this idea, like, no, they're not coming back for you at all. We've said it before, but it always rings true that the cult-like nature of the Borg literally strips out individuality and leaves its members, when they are removed, with an all-encompassing faith in the structure and the intention of the collective. They literally can't live without it. They believe in it fully until they are deprogrammed, just enough to realize that they can and will be better off without them. Not an easy journey, as we've seen with Seven, and it will take more for these kids. The other part of the story going on here, look, I'm not a parent, but I can surely appreciate the balancing act that's being done here by all the adults in the room. They're actually, you go back and watch, and I feel like they're using this pretty deft hand in navigating the unpredictable nature of the adolescent drones and switching between like a calm understanding and then showing a bit of discipline when it's needed. You see that between Seven and the drones. You see it with Janeway. You see it all over the place. You're just trying to navigate, how do you get through this? And it's good to see Janeway flex that a bit. And Seven is doing that naturally in this kind of understated way. And then she has to face the idea of actually being a parent figure to these kids. So I like all of that. And I also can't help but think of this episode in the same context as Borg, in which Picard had to wrestle with the idea. We mentioned it before, not by name, but he had to wrestle with the idea of using a Borg drone as a kind of weapon to start a genocide against the entire collective. We got some pushback that Picard should have just done it because, hey, what's wrong with a little genocide, right? But here, Janeway has a similar call to make, and she's clearly conflicted, even with her logical security officer ready to go. And Janeway makes the right call here. She looked for the alternative, and she found it. How about you, Norman?
Well, it's so interesting that I think we're landing on the same point from completely different directions. Because I mentioned this before. I'm gonna quote two passages, both from Janeway. And Janeway was talking to Seven earlier on, and Seven said something along the lines of, I don't think I'm the right person for the job to take care of these children. And then Janeway says, I appreciate your insights, but just because they didn't have the benefit of your Borg upbringing doesn't mean we're going to turn our backs on them. And I put this in bold. There has to be another way.
Yeah.
Then we get back to the scene, the pivotal scene, in my opinion, and one of the best written scenes in Voyager, when Tuvok was talking about release the pathogen. He says to Janeway, there is no alternative. And Janeway says, there's always an alternative. We just need to find it. So the moral meaning or message that I landed on, when all else fails, find more options until those fail, and then find more options, right?
Yeah. And by the way, I just want to go back to that first scene that you cited, because as you were saying that, I keep thinking, well, yeah, of course, that's Janeway being the good captain that she is. You find more alternatives. When those fail, you find more alternatives. Why does Janeway, or rather, not Janeway, why does Seven think she's so special that she regained her individuality? Why is she so ready to give up on these kids? And it takes Janeway saying, like, no, we can do this.
But that's a Janeway that I loved seeing before. And I think it's a great return to form when sometimes I don't think that Janeway is written, or crafted in the best possible light. So I think that, didn't we Mandela effect some Picard speech saying that, if all else fails, find more options, and if those fail, find more options. I know that it's out there somewhere in some form.
I'm determined one day we're going to find this. Yeah.
But, in the tone, in the meaning of that's always been for me the Star Trek way, right? It's not the self-destruct sequence way. It's not the time travel last minute save way. It's the quote unquote humans are clever and work hard Gene Roddenberry way, right? And I'm not saying that quote-unquote Gene's vision is the ultimate, because all these different interpretations of Star Trek have their own value. But at the end of the day, it's the keep trying it, because if we don't, we end up doing something terrible way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm glad these two scenes exist, with Seven and with Tuvok, because there's something in common here. So Janeway's compassion trumps Seven's and Tuvok's stoic logic. They're the both stoic characters on the ship. But she's the one who actually gets the upper hand here because of this philosophy. Her decisions to find another way are solid reminders of the Janeway that I came to understand and respect in earlier seasons of Voyager. The one where she's exhausting all the odds and all the options and isn't the Janeway or the highway blow up the ship Janeway, right? And I feel that there was a loss of writing quality in her arcs because both Jerry Taylor and Lisa Klink were no longer part of the show.
Agreed.
So I miss this more fair and balanced Janeway, someone who pushes for the right reasons, for the right, for the right times, and I hope to see more of her as we continue our journey through season 6.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Spirit Folk.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. Do you want to enroll your Borg kids in 7 School for Gifted Youngsters? Hurry up, seats are limited. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.